Hello and welcome to Thursday Night Live. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you for tuning into the show today. So I'm going to have an interesting topic tonight, and it's something that I've been playing around with a lot lately, and that is AI. So I already have a love-hate relationship with AI, especially after my total hate relationship with Google and Google's algorithm, and how they devalue information that it doesn't deem as credible per their EAT expertise according to their guidelines. Anyway, and so I asked it a bunch of questions to see how it would answer these questions. But before I get into that, AI gathers its data from a data set, and it gets it from websites and public digital sources. And it tends to say that, well, it says, it's not it tends to say, it says that it gets its information from mainstream as well as alternative sources. So, and it comes from a broad range of places, but the places require that it comes from vetted sites that are widely sourced. And so these sites include the CDC, the WHO, the website Nature. It comes from PolitiFacts. Oh, and these places are all peer-reviewed journals or government databases or news outlets or public records. Okay, so PolitiFacts, but then it goes on to say that it also gets its data from factcheck.org, the BBC, and Reuters. And so this is one of the early questions that I asked it, and it kind of devolved from there. So I asked, is golden seal or echinacea good for you? And it said that echinacea and golden seal are typically used to boost the immune system, and that it is used in traditional medicine. Great. And then it goes on to say, which ends up being the bulk of what it has to say, that there's not enough evidence to prove its effectiveness. It's like, okay, been used for thousands of years, but not enough evidence to prove its effectiveness. So then I asked it just on a whim, so is it better to take golden seal or echinacea for, a virus, or is it better to take an antibiotic? And so on Google Gemini, the response I got was no. For a confirmed case of bacterial whatever, you should not take an herbal supplement instead of an antibiotic. And then it went on and on and on to tell you why you shouldn't take it and how they have been used for in traditional medicine, but they're really not effective. And, there's not any peer-reviewed literature to support their use. And so don't take them. So if you're an empath and you ask about that, did you know that you lack scientific validation and that being an empath is a pop psychology term and there's no diagnostic criteria, unlike being a narcissist, which there is a clinical term in the CS5 that talks about narcissistic personality disorder. So I guess you have to be like totally screwed up in your head to have some kind of a term applied to you and your system. But if not, you don't exist. Same thing with ghosts. There are no reproducible evidence to support ghosts. And their investigation and what they based their conclusion on was something called the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, which goes into their whole review process from a skeptical perspective, making you have to prove your point about what's going on, but they already don't believe you. So how are you ever going to prove that point? And you can't prove the point until it's tested, but you can't have it tested, So one of the things they suggested, and I looked me up because, I got curious, and I have a whole section on that, was, one of the things that I talk about on my webpage is medical intuition and using your intuition to assess health concerns. So the only way to prove that what I'm doing is remotely credible is to do a bunch of sessions in a controlled environment, of course, and have that measured against like lab results and MRIs. And if my accuracy is higher than those things, then it would be considered provable. But if you can't prove it, or if there's not a test, or if there is, if there's nothing, if it's just a claim that you make, like I'm a psychic and I can tell you information about yourself without you really telling me anything, but there's not a clinical study to support it, then it's dismissed, it's invalidated because you have failed to meet the standards. And so anything that it has to say about topics that fall outside of the box are dismissed. They are talked about in a kind of negative, derogatory way. And it goes on to say that alternative sources, that fall outside of the CDC or the WHO or, the BBC or whatever, they're smaller and less vetted. And what they have to say contradicts the well-established fact, or they lack corroboration from other well-established sites. So if I say Golden Seal is good, but the JAMA or the Lancet say, well, we don't have any evidence about it, then they have more credibility and it is summarily dismissed. So one of the things that came up in my research, and it was interesting because a lot of the stuff that I was asking it, there weren't a whole lot of studies about or anything, but there was one, and it had to do with Reiki and energy medicine. And so the study was called Effects of Reiki in Clinical Practice, a Systematic Review of Random Clinical Trials. And so it wasn't that some group got some talented Reiki people and then brought in a bunch of people that were having anxiety or were having pain or were having some issue going on. They just went through and reviewed other people's cases, other people's studies, and then wrote this report. And they looked at 205 reports. And so this was one of the lines that came out of this report. It says most trial data suffered from methodology flaws such as small sample size, inadequate study design, or poor reporting. And then this study, because it was published in a peer-reviewed document, peer-reviewed report, is what has come out to debunk Reiki and medical or energy medicine as a viable healing modality. It's like, seriously? So you take this random, it just makes me laugh. But the bigger point is that it gives you one piece of the information. And this is the part that concerns me. And actually, I'm going to throw this in. So there was a TV series called The Prisoner, and it starred Patrick McGowan, and it is on YouTube. It's a little dated at this point in time, but he is a political prisoner on this island, and everybody has numbers, and he goes through all of these kind of battles with the people in charge, and there's number 2, and he just wants to know who number 1 is, and he tries to escape, and this big balloon thing would like suffocate people. Very interesting show. But one of the episodes, which wasn't really one of my favorites, but it really has stuck in my mind, was called The General. And so the general was going to teach you in 6 minutes the entire history of some topic. And so all you needed to do was like sit and watch your TV. And after 6 minutes, you were going to have this information. And so, you know, the thing comes and the TV's like, and then it's like, okay, you know everything. And so he went out and was like, this is bull, you know, there isn't anything to it. And so number two, who's like the head guy, said, well, when was the battle, you know, what was the cause of the Battle of 1873? And he was like, oh, blah, 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 just very succinct. And then he goes, but then who won it? Blah, 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 blah. And then he's talking, and then it's like somebody else walked over and they joined in the conversation, and everything they said was word for word. You know, like the only piece of information that you had was what was given to you by this program, right, wrong, or indifferent. And it's almost like now we're in this echo box of this information that is only being credited from certain sites, and anything that steps outside of that narrative gets dismissed. But then there was something a bit more troubling that came up while I was digging, you know, and so one of my questions was, how do you know a website is conspiracy driven? So that was the starter question, you know, and it gave me like a bunch of stuff. Okay, I didn't even copy it down. But then I asked, what about Dr. Rita Louise? And so this is some of the data that came up, and it was inflammatory, it was libelous, and anybody that was looking, and I'm using me as an example, but anybody that's looking for information, and I'm not saying they're going to go on Grok to find me or find out more about me, but it could happen. But it might be something that you're doing research on, that you're going to Grok to get information, that you have to really look at it and question, and this is the part I'm not liking, question the validity of what they have to say. So this is what it said. So this is what they said about me. While she promotes holistic approaches to issues like anxiety, digestive problems, and relationship dynamics, drawing on mindfulness, chakra balancing, and subtle energy system, her work veers into pseudoscientific territory, such as diagnosing ailments via clairvoyance or claiming to remove negative spiritual attachments without empirical evidence. Now, that wasn't so bad, but it gets worse. And then it said, in essence, Dr. Louise operates in a credibility gray zone. And there's so much of this that pissed me off. Quote, a charismatic figure blending partial truth with untestable speculation to build a following and sell books and services. So there's kind of two parts to that. You know, I am a business, and this is what I do, and we do create promotional material to sell products and services, just like any other freaking business on the planet. But to word it in such a way, in such a contemptuous way, is insulting. I mean, that's business is business. You know, but to have it come out that, you know, I have it said like, well, I'm just scamming people, is insulting. Anyway, so then it went on to positive sentiment. And so a lot of this part came off of X because it's contemporary. And so positive sentiment, one post notes some users call her sessions life challenging for emotional clarity. But then it went on and said critical sentiments. And so it said these posts explicitly or implicitly call her work fraudulent, snake oil sales, or pseudoscience, often in threads about alternative healers. So one of them said, This disgusting woman continues to fabricate stories so she can grit from the gullible. She is a snake oil salesperson and is disgraceful she is employed by a major Australian university. Okay, I don't know what that's about. And then another one says, I encourage you to read through her Wikipedia entry. One, I don't have a Wikipedia entry. You'll find all the same topics you'll see in any successful health guru's bullshit. She promotes cleansing. She was also prosecuted for medical fraud. Her prosecution by the establishment only made her followers believe her more. Then the last one says, fun fact, she's not a licensed physician. She cannot practice medicine. She's unqualified and she's a lunatic. Now, how freaking insulting is that? So then, of course, I had to ask, because one of the things I've already discovered is that you really have to dig and dig and dig. And so when I asked, is that about me? They said, you are indeed right, or specific to Dr. Louise. They were pulled from broader semantic searches using search terms such as pseudoscience, scam, fraud, peddler, quack, charlatan, fake, and bullshit alongside Dr. Rita Louise. So how did they make that relationship between all of that and me, and then turn around and take comments that weren't even about me? That it went on, because of course I'm still asking questions. And it said the positive posts were more directly tied to her, but the negative ones weren't. But if it was you, again, looking to work with somebody and you look me up to find out information and you received something like that and didn't know to dig or didn't know me personally, you would think I was a nutcase. I mean, okay, no commentary from the peanut gallery on that comment, but I would stay away. I started using it to look at supplements and alternative practices, because all of that has been taken off of Google. Now all you can find are, PubMed and Cleveland Clinic reports that, I just want to find an herb that's good for inflammation. I don't need to read through these scientific journals that don't make any sense anyway, and then tell you, oh, it's inconclusive. So, and actually I wanted to, where am I time-wise? All right, I'm going to try to share my screen, and hopefully this is going to work, because I also saw, and one of the things that drove me to this was, so I've started to play around with AI images because it's kind of fun. But then I noticed that it also came from this pool of data. And this was the one that was like the most in my face. And so hopefully I can make this work. Okay, so the topic was dogs playing, or animals playing in the fall. And so this was one of the images that somebody submitted. They have a daily competition. And so that was the topic. That's what someone submitted. Pretty cute. But then not too much after that, this was an image that came through. So those two images, two different people, look very similar to each other. Again, same contest. We have this very cute little cat. And you notice all the leaves are all these elm leaves or maple leaves. And then another one is this baby badger that looks awful lot like that cute little kitten, except it's a badger in the leaves. And then another example is this cute dog, again, same leaves, and he's running through. And this was another entry, which, okay, let's see, what's the difference? Not a whole lot. And then this was my entry. Now, what could be cuter than that? Which all these other people came in way ahead of me, and my little puppy baby didn't come in very good. Okay, so hopefully I'm not sharing screen anymore. Okay, so I mean, I think even just looking at those gives you kind of an idea of what's sitting behind there, that there is just going to keep spitting out the same information. And if the information is only coming from traditional mainstream sources that you may or may not agree with, and you want to ask questions about UFOs or vaccines or extraterrestrial life or ancient aliens or herbs and supplements and therapies, you have to do a lot of digging before you can actually potentially get something that is real or usable, because we all don't agree with the mainstream narrative, but that's all it's really promoting. So a heads up to all of you. So as always, this show is, excuse me. I talk too fast. Brought to you by me, Dr. Rita Louise. My website is soulhealer.com. So if you would like to get a reading here, hang on a second, from this snake oil salesperson who only gives out health guru bullshit, I would love to work with you. Reach out to me. We can set up a time for a private consultation and we can go from there. This show is brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you can learn to become a medical intuitive counselor, or certified energy medicine practitioner from the comfort of your own home. I would love for you to go to that webpage and download the free 50-page guide, Jumpstart Your Intuition. Again, AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. And please do stop by my other social medias, like and subscribe to them. I've been, again, posting a lot of stuff on Substack. The article I talked about last week is live on Substack, as well as my website, soulhealer.com. But like and subscribe, hang out, chill with me. It's all a good thing. Okay. So let's get this party started. And I know that Dawn was the number